Hey everybody, welcome to Drive Thru Review 640. Today we're going to take a look at Chronicles of Crime. Now this is a game from Lucky Duck Games, and this is a very different style of game. So this is sort of, I guess you could say it's in the vein of Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective, or also maybe kind of like an unlock or escape room game, a little bit, not a lot, but it's more of a detective game. So what players are going to do is they're going to go on these different cases. Now all the cases are driven by an app that's going to be on your phone. And you're going to do some mechanics on the phone, a lot of mechanics on your phone. And then there's also going to be some different cards and location boards and things like that that you're going to organize to work out the various different cases. There's like a campaign case that's like 3 cases in one, so to speak. And there's a variety of other kind of one-shot cases as well. There's even like a virtual reality component, which I'll show you. But let's go ahead and jump in and take a little bit closer look at how it works, and then I'll come back and tell you what I think of it. Okay, so I've got the board and some extra boards set up here. Now the main thing to keep in mind is this main board right here, and you can see all of these slots here at the top. Those are for clue cards. So over the course of the game, you might go to crime scenes and find kind of various kind of generic clues, but it'll have a specific meaning, you know, for your particular case. So I'm going to show you a little bit of the tutorial because I don't really want to spoil anything. But in the tutorial, you may or may not find some food. And so if it tells you to find food, then you're going to go ahead and put that up here, and you can kind of organize them as you wish on that board. Then you're also going to have here a location. This is Scotland Yard. And you can see everything here has a QR code. So there's a QR code on food, on the location there, on this guy who happens to be the police chief. There's a variety of different types of individuals in here. And depending on the case, they're going to be different people. So this guy might be the murderer in a different case. He might just be a witness. But in this case, he's the police chief. And so you're going to be scanning things. So in the tutorial now, you can, that might be kind of weird to look at on the camera, but it tells me to scan this guy. So I'm going to hold and scan it. And then boom, it comes up with some dialogue there. He tells me a little bit about the case. He says, go find this woman and so on. And then she may or may not tell you where to actually put the character there. So you're going to scan it. So if he tells you to pull a character out, okay, this is the dead woman there. And then if you don't really know quite where they may be at, you can just kind of put them here. But then as you go along, you have these different location boards like so. So we're going to find, you know, where her house was at and then set that over here. Let's say it was in Westminster. And then you say, oh, okay, she's there. And then you can go like investigate, like look at the body. If she was a witness, you scan it, and she'll tell you about it. And then to move around though, you're going to scan these different locations here, so that to move there, you would go there and so on. And while you're sort of dialoguing, in this case with a particular character, you can scan other things. You could scan, you know, one of your clues. You could scan other people. And so you're effectively like asking them about that topic. One thing you don't do is you don't ever scan a location, because then it thinks you want to leave. And if you're in a conversation with somebody in the app, it'll say, hey, are you sure you want to leave the conversation and move away? And so on. Now, the other thing that you can scan is these 4 individuals here. And you can scan them from anywhere. And effectively what you're doing is calling them. So if you want to have the doctor here do an autopsy, you just scan that and you say, hey, what do you want me to autopsy? Well, then you would scan this and he would do an autopsy on that. Or if you want the scientist here to look at some piece of evidence that a scientist would look at. Maybe she wants to investigate residue found on something, you know, that kind of thing. Then you have your criminologist, who's sort of like your psychologist. You can ask them about different people. And then really useful is this hacker. So you can just ask him about people in general, and he'll go look them up on the computer database and say, hey, this person so-and-so, you know, whatever, he used to be in the war, or he has got a criminal record, or so on. And you can ask him about that stuff, or you can ask him about kind of computery related stuff as well. So you can always call them from any location. And you kind of just bounce around a little bit until you start to figure out, you know, who committed the murder or the robbery or whatever the thing is. Then you're going to move back here to Scotland Yard, talk to your police chief, and then he's going to go through a series of questions. And then you're going to find out if you were right or wrong on some of those questions. And if you wish, you can see the whole solution, or you can choose not to see it, to go back in and restart the case, and then see if you can't get to it on your own. And so you're going to get a score. based on how quickly you solve the case as well as how correct you were on the questions. And every time you scan something in here, it's going to eat up a little bit of in-game time. So I don't remember the exact numbers. The actual rule book tells you a lot of that stuff, but you don't really need the rule book to play. You could just jump into the tutorial, set the cards up, and away you go. It's going to explain everything. The rules are very, very simple. You're basically scanning stuff and discussing it at the table. But just needless to say, when you talk to somebody, or when you travel to a location, or when you make a phone call, it's going to eat up time. Now, there's one thing that's really neat that the app does, and if you want, you can get this extra little thing. I think this is just a few bucks. You clip this onto your phone, and then you can do a VR version of what I'm going to show you now. So here we've gotten to a location, and it wants us to search for clues. So obviously I can't show you this in VR. So we're going to do that, and you get to pick if you've got the glasses or not. You say no, and then you're going to look around. Now as you turn the phone, you can see it, but you also just kind of swipe your fingers. So every time you do this as well, you are using up in-game time. And then you can zoom in and stuff like that. So you're trying to look at all of the different clues and stuff. And this is just a tutorial, but you can see there's the dead woman, and there's some other things around here that might look, oh, looks weird. What's that? All right, so it's just a tutorial, so I don't want to spoil a bunch of stuff. So you do this, and then after a while, it's going to kind of time out. And then if you want, you can give it to another player to kind of look around. But what you're doing is you're yelling out things that you're seeing that could be some of these different clues and stuff. And then after that, you're going to scan, and it'll tell you whether it's relevant or not. So if you find some food there, you're like, oh, that food looks suspicious. So it'll say, hey, that is a clue. Go ahead and put it here up on the board, and you can start to ask people about it and get forensics and things like that done. Now, sometimes you can get special clues, and it'll tell you, based on it, it'll show you a little symbol with the star, and these are a variety of different kind of really abstract things that are very specific to the case, that are going to be very, very, very important clues there. So that's it. You kind of jump around, ask questions, try to do it as quick as you can, but I wouldn't feel like there's a lot of pressure to do the cases as fast as you can, because you don't want to rush too far and then figure out, you get to the end and it's like, oh, why is he asking about that? I don't know what that means, So try to do it as best you can, and I wouldn't really rush because it's not that big a deal. To me, it's more important to get things right than to get a better score, which I think is good. Okay, so that was Chronicles of Crime. So to give you a sense with the player count, I don't know that matters too much. I've soloed cases. I've played cases with, 2 other players. And I don't know, there's not really a limit on the player count. I don't know that you want like a whole ton of people at the table, because it's just kind of too many cooks in the kitchen as far as the player count, because you have one person kind of passing the app around, reading stuff. There's not like a ton of text though. You can just recite it and be done and be discussing it. I think you definitely would want some player taking notes. We found that if you didn't take notes, you could definitely forget things. So you need 1 or 2 people kind of taking notes, or just being able to catalog stuff in their head. And that's why, you want a few people at the table, I think, to kind of juggle all that stuff. So I would say it's definitely right in the sweet spot, 2, 3, 4. Solo was pretty good, but like when I soloed, I was like, I don't remember what that person told me, and I wasn't keeping notes at all. But once you have other players or somebody taking notes or something, then it's going to work pretty well. The play time is going to vary based on the different cases. So just to kind of spoil, I played it 4 times in a row the other night, and I don't know how long we were there. We were a couple hours. It wasn't too long. So the cases seemed like they could probably do half an hour to an hour. So I don't think any of the cases went over an hour. So that's play time and player count idea. Oh, the one last tidbit with the player count is, yeah, you could have somebody reading the app, but having different people take turns looking at the rooms and then reciting that's cool, because that kind of gives everybody that cool experience where they're sort of combing the scene of the crime or whatever that they're at, trying to find clues and shouting them out and stuff. And then if you're like, well, let's do it again, then you give it to Billy next time and he does the same spot, because there may be the interesting thing about this, before I get into the next topic, is the imagery. You saw it on the video. It's sort of cartoony, like it's not photorealistic, which I wouldn't expect on a phone necessarily. But there are sometimes I'm like, what is that? I think those are bullets, but I'm not sure. So I would say just err on the side of drawing the card if you think, and then it'll say, oh, well, that was a clue. You're like, okay, those were bullets. Or sometimes not. So I kind of like that because you're trying to figure out what it is, but you might waste in-game time if you're like, well, I thought that was food or something, and it wasn't. It was, you had to go back and look, and you're like, I can't tell what that is. And it's probably nothing important if you can't tell what it is, but sometimes it is. So I would say just know that. And the VR thing's okay. I don't know. I'm not like a big VR person generally, so it's okay. I used it and I was like, let's just use the phone by itself, and you can just kind of use your finger and zoom in and out easier and stuff like that. So I thought that was fine. As far as what is this game like, well, it definitely reminds me of the Unlock a little bit because you've got some cards kind of laid out, and there's not really any information on the cards other than these are the words and these are people and these are places. But you're using cards, and then you've got the app, and you're going back and forth between all that stuff. So it does feel like an Unlock game. It does remind me of like, Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective, or the new detective game from Portal that came out this year. So it's in that vibe, right? So honestly, I like this better than, as far as all of those detective games, Sherlock Holmes and Detective, I like this way better than all of that. To me, this is like my favorite detective game of all those. The other ones have not ever really, hit me. They're not social in the right way, and the writing is like, there's like too much writing in those other ones, and there's like pointless writing, and it's just like the cases, well, in terms of detective, the cases were not very exciting. These cases are exciting. There's stuff that like happens during the case that'll like shift the case and stuff in like a very dramatic ways. And it feels like a episode of, CSI or Law and Order, or a good cop movie or something like that. So this has a good feel, a very modern feel like that. And I got really, into that with this. So this is a definite recommend. I think I don't know what it goes for online and stuff. It was a Kickstarter before. I think the price, it was like $30 at most. I've seen it online or something. I can't remember where I saw the price though. Definitely pick it up. I don't think you necessarily need the VR thing, but if you're into VR, you can get it. That's a few bucks. But I definitely recommend this. It's got that nice bridge of kind of the escape room, kind of unlock exit vibe where you're kind of using the app a little bit. And then most of the discussion though is pivoted off of these cards that are just words like food with a picture of, or like a medallion will be a picture, and then there'll be a picture of the person. And it's like you start to sort of attribute all the narrative and personality and all this stuff yourself to all these just random cards that are on the table. And the app is just sort of a guidepost. You're not like living in the app a lot. And you spend some time in it, but a lot of times you're discussing, you're thinking, you're taking notes, you're comparing all that stuff. You're doing all of that detective work, as you go. So most of the interaction is social and in your face, which is, the whole tabletop experience. And then the other thing is like, so sometimes when you do a case, it will you'll be like, okay, we should go back and talk to that person now. And what they're going to tell you now is going to change based on, stuff you've uncovered. You've got a new clue to ask them about. Or sometimes when you talk to them, you don't have to mention anything and their demeanor has changed. You're like, okay, that I found this thing. And so now you can start to question them about the right thing, and that's going to trigger them. They'll leave, or there'll be, some other event will happen that will be very dramatic. And so when those moments happen, you get the opportunity to recite this awesomeness to the other players there, and everybody's like, whoa, so just in terms of app games as well, I think this really succeeds because I don't want to say you barely use the app, because the mechanics are the app, but the game is not the app. The game is happening with all the other players in the discussion and everything. It's that all happens here. You're not just clicking through. So a lot of the app games, like the Descent game and the Mansions of Madness and all these different things, then, you're living in the app too much. So this is just that great balance of that. So it's a lot like an escape room thing. It's got the detective flair, but it's all happening with the players. So I definitely highly recommend this game. This is one of my favorite games that I played this year. And I'd like to see this evolving, I don't know what you call it, detective escape room narrative arc for whatever kind of style game this is. Really, really great. Definitely recommend Chronicles of Crime. Thanks.